Okay, so to understand the barely missed X strategy, you first have to understand how an apex is formed. And the way an apex is formed is, let's walk through each letter. Okay, so we got A for alert. Alright, so right there is our A. And it has the lowest low. The low of the bar is right there, so we had like a low, a low, a low. And then we had a higher low. The second that bar closes, okay, that A is plotted. It's a confirmed A, or at least it's a pin. I mean, it's somewhat of a pending A. It'll be fully confirmed when the X happens, but that's what it takes for an A. It won't go away unless the market reverses. Okay. Now we got P. P stands for pivot. So P is the highest bar since or including the A bar. Okay? So we got that P bar labeled right there. There it is. It's the highest bar since or including the A bar. They're high, 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 and a high right there. Okay? The E bar, entry breakout bar, or entry bar if you're doing the profit popper strategy. All the other strategies, it's the entry breakout bar. It has to break the low of the P by the offset. There's a setting in the indicator called offset, which is by default 2 and pretty much should always be at 2 unless you have some magical reason for changing it, but I can't tell you one. The only thing I can tell you is you'd use 1 if it's less than 6 ticks on diagnostic bars because of how they form, and we can go into all this stuff. Bottom line, all the settings we put on the screen for you are at 6 ticks or higher. Use 2 tick offset. You don't ever need to mess with the setting. Okay? So right there, if it breaks the low of that bar by 2 ticks, it'll instantly become an E. Now, while this is moving up, you'll see a P, and then you'll see a P, and then it'll disappear. Remember, it's the highest high. Once that E happens, that P's locked in. Okay? For the moment. Now, what would happen if the next bar made a new high? What's the P bar? It's the highest high since or including the A bar. Alright? So if the P bar is the highest high since or including the A bar and another bar makes a new high, then that now has to become the P bar. It's now the pivot bar. It'll be confirmed once the next bar breaks its low by 2 ticks. The E bar, the offset. Okay? This bar will become orange. Just so you know that there was an E there, so we're not hiding it from you. Okay? Doesn't mean you got an entry. Doesn't mean you didn't get an entry. Doesn't mean anything. It just means it's an old E. There was an E. But let's show you the P, because this is the true pivot at this point. Okay? E bar happens. Now you have other bars drop down. When a bar finally breaks the low of the A bar, then, and this is where the BMX all comes into play, then the X is formed. Okay? So you got alert, pivot, entry, X. So if it breaks the low of the A, it will make an X. If you're making if it's a long apex, what would have to happen if I went over here and I had markets rising, then this happens, and we'll say that's a green A, okay, and that's a P, and that's an E. What would have to happen to get an X bar? Would have to go above the A. That's right. Break the high of the A. Not close above, just break above. Yeah. That's how the apex works. Okay? So the market's going down, 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 down. And then you get a pullback. That becomes a red A. And that's not red. And then a P, and then an E, and then breaks the low. That's my X bar. Okay? For it to flip, then I would need to get an apex. So let's say this is my apex right here. I got a short apex, okay? So I got a P, I got an E, I got an X. Right, my handwriting looks about as good as this, by the way. So apex right there. And then this would be what's called a power line. You can see them, they're very faint, but there actually is a red line if you look really close. Look right there. I have it basically drawn over, but there's a red line right there. If you look really close, you'll notice there's a red line right in the middle of that. It's a power line, okay? So for it to flip, let's say the market comes down and all of a sudden it does, this number on us. What you need every letter, every bar that makes up this apex. Okay? A, the P, the E, the X. All their highs have to be above that power line, and then it'll flip and become a green apex. That's how the apex pattern works. It just does it over and over and over again. Okay? Simple as that sounds. It's insane to program. But right there, like all that, and I mean, there's like probably another 20 little things I could tell you about the intricacies of the pattern. But bottom line is, that's the concept you need to understand. Okay? You don't have to know exactly how, a processor works on your computer to get the fact that you just need it to work, and you need as much processing power as possible. Okay? So, I have to understand how, what horsepower really means in torque on a car to drive it, and how an alternator works. And it's good to understand some basic concepts. I think it's wise to understand some basic things that are happening. But you don't got to master all the details of it. What you want to figure out what is going to help you make money. So now that we got that down, because I'm going to show you BMX, but what I want to do is first I want to just help you see before I take it away from you. I want to show it to you. So right here we got this A, and basically what I do is I have a 5-tick zone. Okay? I draw that, and I'll actually grab it and I'll move it every time I get a new A. And if the market, didn't mean to do that. Draw my little zone. Okay, if a bar gets in that zone, and within 2 bars, okay, doesn't break the low of the A. What happens if it doesn't break the low of the A? What happens when it does? I'm sorry. What happens when it does break the low of the A? What happens? You're right, Hines. It does reverse. But what doesn't happen? It does reverse when it doesn't happen. But what doesn't happen when it doesn't break the low of the A? And X doesn't print, right? If it does break the low of the A, the X will print. If it doesn't happen, no X. Yeah. I probably asked that like in 5 different ways. Sorry about that. Okay, so it did break the low, so we got an X. But what happens if it doesn't do it, and all of a sudden the bar is actually here and then here? Okay? So if within 2 bars, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the last bar, so 2 bars after the last bar that was in the zone. Okay, so if it was in this zone at all, and meaning like at it or like 5 to 0, meaning A plus 5. Okay, low of A plus 5. If any price came within that zone, if it touched that zone in that zone, 2 bars after the last bar that was in it, I now consider what's called a barely missed X. Okay? Which is a great reversal trade. It's my favorite reversal trade. I like the MVP reversals. Apex reversals are pretty good. BMX reversals are fantastic. And what's funny is we used to use this to know when to get out of a trade. Like for a long time. Like when that happens, get out, stay out. You're going to get cremated if you stay in. And then we're like, wait a minute. why aren't we going the other direction? If it's that good, why don't we just go the other way? And yeah, so MVP reversals. And so how do I do that? Well, if I'm in a trade, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my stop loss right above that. Okay, I'm going to trail my stop right down to 3 ticks above. Okay? And I'm also going to go over here and I'm going to set my entry to buy the same price. So it's basically, say I'm short 1 contract, I'm going to go long 2 at 3 ticks above. The second bar after the last bar that was inside the BMX zone. Okay, let me see here. I got a question.